Piece here. Right, there we go.
Yeah, I think it's just really slow. Hopefully it figures itself out as it loads everything.
And then okay, we're live now. And if they can talk so I can listen.
All right, Monica, we got to keep a little dialogue going while they test a little sound.
Oh, yes.
Uh-oh, the silence doesn't bode well. Well, have you been able to think about it at all? I take it you haven't made a selection. Have you made any progress towards?
Yes and no, I guess. Whenever I start, I kind of get overwhelmed by other decisions which might affect the color that I want for the timbers.
Yes, I've heard that before. I wish I would have reminded you sooner because now we have to make a decision fast. So what kind of things, when you talked about what kind of things are getting in the way of a decision, what do you mean?
Well, the kitchen cabinets and countertops for one. I just wish I knew what I wanted for furniture, flooring, and the big color choices in the home. What would you recommend, Bert, for the stain?
Oh, back slowly away from the gun. You put me on the spot, Monica, or Sarah. I've proven that I've gone the extra mile, I believe. I've got your best interest at heart, but for me to dive into those waters.
I'm sorry, that's an unfair question.
Okay, so I guess, we can look at what maybe you can do to, as far as the process, a way to go ahead.
What would you suggest I do to make a decision?
Well, the quick, easy, dirty fix is do you have your horoscope handy? No. Okay, so as far as how many of you have been involved in a decision and have had your questions, as you move along in the process, you unearth more questions and answers and things get muddy. Start off with what seems like a simple decision, and then as it progresses, it gets muddy. Has anyone ever experienced that? Okay, yep. And it can feel like herding cats a lot of times. And how many of you have been involved in either remodeling or building? Okay, most of you? All right. So what we're going to talk about with this skit tonight, what we're going to really try to uncover is really giving you some information that will get your feet set under you so you don't have to make decisions on the fly like that. And just one little takeaway, mentally note it down. If you should find yourself in a position where you maybe even had your colors picked out, but something changed and you decided you didn't like it or whatever happened, and you have to make a decision right on the spot or really quick, one thing you can do is to take a stain, but tone the color down, do a half tint. And what that will do is it'll kind of point you in the direction you think you might want to go. But if it's not totally where you want to go, you'll be able to override that with stronger colors. Make sense? Okay, and in our audience tonight, we have Sherry in the back. She supplies us with our stain. We really are happy with her product. And she's the one that's given me that half tint tip way back when. So we have that ace in the hole. We don't tell people about that ahead of time because then it just kicks the can further down the road. It's better to try to make a decision, right? And so anyway, tonight what we've got for you. Oop, maybe I gotta go. So we're going to talk about cracking wood. Why does wood crack? Now, Josh may have covered some of that. And as far as the kiln drying, the value of kiln drying, I've heard he's went through the whole thing, so we won't have to cover that part. We talk about wood species. Monica will speak to what types of wood might align with the style that you like. Some woods are darker, some have more yellows, some oranges. There's different grain patterns. You can hear about that. And as far as wood species, then I'm going to take a turn with the pros and cons of different woods. Okay? And then we're going to go through timber colors as they unfold in the context of building. So we got 3 projects for you. Just kind of take it holistically, and you're going to get more than just colors. But it's the best way to absorb information is in the context as it's getting used rather than little sound bites. And then we'll move to questions and answers. Okay, and Monica is here, going to help us a lot with the colors. I always learn stuff when I'm working with Monica, and I've worked with her partner, Kara, as well. And interior designers that are good make the process easier. Many builders and owners have had a bad experience with interior designers, whereas it complicates things and makes things more expensive and decisions take forever. When that's happening, most of the time, the interior designer is really in idea phase and searching the discovery process, whereas they should be trying to circle the wagons and figure out what people want and bring things to a close. And both Monica and Kara have done that well. Now, Monica, if you will, tell us, the audience, just to bring the audience up to speed before they hear all of your tips. Can you tell us why you do what you do, and kind of, how and when you got started?
Yeah, thanks, Bert. I have been doing interior design for about 27 years now. And the reason I do what I do is I love to help people ultimately. I really enjoy that relational aspect of working with clients and trying to get them through the process. And I just think our homes are make such a huge impact on how we find respite, how we find health in our mental health. They have just such a huge impact on us mentally, emotionally, and I love making homes be what people want, whether that's a rejuvenating or a respite. There's a number of different things that we can kind of bring into some of the spaces, but I just love it. I love interiors, and I love making homes comfortable for folks.
Okay, and then how do you get started? I like that story.
Yeah, so my dad was a graphic artist, and my grandmother painted, so there was some creativity in my family for sure. But I had kind of a unique experience when I was about 12 years old. I babysat for a gal that did windows at Nordstrom, and she was always doing interesting things with her home. She was always rearranging furniture, and it was in the days before internet, before cell phones, and they didn't even have a television. So while the child was sleeping, I spent time on the sofa just flipping through whatever magazines that she had, and she had a bunch of interior design magazines. And so I spent months looking through interior design magazines, and I babysat for several years. And at one point my dad had asked me, what do you think you want to do? And I thought, you know what, I think I want to do interior design. And I never changed my mind. It was just always something that I went after, and started at a young age, taking shop classes and learning how to draw and do some of those kinds of things that were necessary. And yeah, I've loved it. Never regretted that decision.
Perfect. Thank you, Monica. And let's give her a welcome round of applause, if you will.
Thank you.
Okay. So when you guys got the shrinkage class from Josh, did he explain which way shrinkage around the racetrack versus shrinkage perpendicular? Did he cover that with you? Okay, this weighs 2 times as much, and the shrinkage occurs around the racetrack. Obviously, there's much more distance around the outside. More shrinkage is going to occur on the outside. Therefore, somewhere it's got to pop to the heart. The shrinkage has to go somewhere. When you have a boxed heart, so the reason that anyone ever seen a post or a beam that really corkscrews? Yeah. Okay. Do you know why that happens? Okay, your lucky night. All right. So the reason this happens, let's just say we got a boxed heart beam like so, and it checks to the heart. Okay. If the grain is just straight, it's not slope grain, you're going to have the check kind of just run down the log or the beam, and it'll be wider at this point. And maybe if you got 12 inches here, you might be 12 and a half there. Okay. But let's use this as a different example. If you have sloped grain, so sloped grain is when the grain is not parallel with the log. How many of you have had a toothpick that you're suddenly using and it just pops off? And you almost get 2 toothpicks because the angle is so sharp. That's sloped grain. That grain came through and it's a long skinny piece. So if you have sloped grain, so you get your check, and what you'll see on the log is your check will happen kind of in staggered units like that. And because it's at an angle, every time that opens up, it gets cattywampus. Follow? Every time it dries and pops open a little bit more, it accentuates that sloped grain, and therefore it twists. Okay? Okay. So how many of you like wood-handled hammers? Okay. Do you know how to get choose a wood-handled hammer that won't break as easy? What's that? Split the wood? I don't understand. If you make your own, follow. Yeah, if you happen to be, that's above and beyond what I've ever done. My hat's off to you. If you are choosing your hammer in the store, just look at the end. If your hammer orients this way, the claw's there, you're going to have a strong hammer. If your hammer orients over here, you're going to have a handle that doesn't shrink so much this way, but it won't be very strong. So, for example, if I'm doing a truss with a king post, I'll orient the grain this way if I have a choice, because any shrinkage that happens at the peak of a truss, that's compressing together and the bottom is going to go down. So you want less shrinkage. There'd be a place where you want less shrinkage. Any questions there? Make sense?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're late. Can you start over?
Oh, we can start over. Now, here's a couple of chairs right here. Right up front here. Depending on if you're talking hammers. If you're talking hammers, yep. problem. Make yourself at home. We're all good. Okay, now just a point about wood. Because it's going to slope more this way, when this dries, it's going to be they call it a parallelogram. You're going to have less shrinkage there, so it's going to kind of look, oops. It's going to kind of look a little bit like this when it's all done drying. It's going to get, man, you're going to be shorter on those 2 points, and you put your square around there, and it's not going to be square anymore. So that's one point with wood orientation and the grain. Okay. And then here is some examples of, do I not have, I thought I was going to, here, hang on, I got to skip ahead just a little bit. Monica, I'm looking for your chart, your color chart, and we may have lost it. Here we are, okay. So I wanted you to speak to colors a little bit before we go through the different examples.
Oh, sure.
Oh, this is our cheat sheet. This is not our colors. We're missing it. Or did I pass it up?
I think it is.
In my order, it was the page prior.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that this is a considerable amount of lag.
Okay.
It's not loaded.
Okay, right, here we are. And I may have gone too far. Let's try back one more. Technology is wonderful, except when it isn't. Okay.
Are you ready for me?
Well, the page isn't quite loaded yet.
Oh, gotcha.
While we're loading, would it be okay to go ahead and pass out the timber planning?
Sure, go ahead. Or did this get changed, Taylor?
It's just not loading. We can try to exit this and then go back into it.
Yeah, to this one? No. Just wait. What if we just, is not loading any pages? Oh, well, let's just use these top colors. Okay. But this is, yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you go through your spiel, Monica, about wood colors and that, and I'll find it on this here, okay?
Okay. Sure. So a lot of times when we're making selections for the wood species for a project, I'm going to usually recommend that it coordinates style-wise with whatever the architecture of the home is. So if we're looking at something that's maybe more of an arts and crafts style, sometimes we might look at like a vertical grain Doug fir or an oak. And then, of course, keeping in mind that wood is going to have an inherent color to it. So as we get into selecting the stain colors, we want to keep that in mind, that the wood is naturally going to have some color that is going to ultimately affect the stain. And so as we're selecting some of those things, of course, with arts and crafts style, you know, we tend to kind of pick more of those real natural tones, the middle toned, warm neutrals, but sometimes they can even go a little bit warmer. Some of the woods that are going to have a little bit more red to them. And so we just have
but
to
what
keep
can
that
we
in mind as we're making
do? You see this here? Oh, the Douglas fir will have red and orange, right?
Right, exactly. More reds and orange in them. And sometimes those are preferred, but sometimes really we want to try and minimize a little bit of the red and orange tones and maybe go a little bit more towards some of the browner tones. But we can always do that in the stain selection as well. So as we're picking a stain color, we can find something that will kind of offset the warmer tone of the wood. And as we're looking at some of the other styles, say maybe it's a more modern style, we might pick a hemlock or a spruce or some of those really more clear grained woods, ones that don't have a lot of grain character to
Okay, so
them.
here's hemlock and there's spruce, yep. I'm with you.
Right. And yeah, and we'll either tend to go lighter in a lot of the more modern style homes, or really do a dark contrast. And again, some of those really clear grained wood species can help with that, just to kind of carry that sleek, more modern look through. Of course, a lot of people like that real rustic look, and there are some reclaimed woods that we can look at for that, and then also looking at some distressing in the wood, you know, more grain character. And if it tends to have more pattern, more unique grain, more character to it, and then also some distressing, and then some of that can also be done in the stain and the effects that we put on the timbers as well in the final finished product.
Perfect. And part of that rustic look, some people have chosen wood. One, in fact, it was Kara was working, when I first worked with Kara, that job, the lady loved knots. And so we were doing just the reverse of what we always do. Find the knottiest side and put that in a prominent place. And if you had a clear side where it was just beautifully clear, that was towards the wall or in an obscure place. And so it's all kind of style, what people want. Okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of the pros and cons of different woods. And how many of you have built with any of these four woods? Or see, okay, what have you built with? But are you using large, or what are you using? Have you? Okay. As far as okay. In a wood shop, in like a furniture type thing, or for building and construction, or both? Mm-hmm. Okay. Larch is what will be a lot of times in building studs and that sort of thing, as well as hemlock. Redwood is generally a little more cost prohibitive, and it's not as strong structurally as other woods, so it's got special uses there. And the Sitka spruce, the best use I know of for that is airplanes. Back in the day, World War II, that was a big thing. But spruce will shrink endwise. One of the few woods that will. Like if you had 8-foot studs built out of spruce, your wall would shrink lengthwise. That doesn't happen with most species of wood. So something to be aware of. I'm going to go to the previous slide because these are really, as far as timber framing, these are the four types of wood that really are used most predominantly. Okay. So cedar, it's very rot resistant. What's another pro? Lightweight. Mm-hmm. And the color, to speak to Monica's point, some people like that dark, rich brown, where you kind of do a clear coat or not have to really stain things heavy. And so it's got natural colors. The grain is straight. It can be very pretty that way. I did one job where a client paid extra money to have clear cedar and none of the little knots. You know, what do they call it? They call it tight knot cedar, where it's just got the little, and you would think, well, the difference between clear and tight knot, why would you pay a premium for clear? Well, I had to admit when the job was done that it looked pretty stinking hot. I mean, it looked pretty good. Not with the absence of those little knots, just kind of, maybe a lot of people wouldn't notice, but I certainly did. So the cons with cedar is it's so soft, it's so light, that if you have any tension loading or any heavy loads, the pieces have to be huge. If that's your style and that's your vibe, that's fine. That's what you go for. But in general, and then it's going to cost more than a lot of other woods. So that's cedar. As far as pine, when they're doing the test here with this data that we have here, most people on the street wouldn't call pine rot resistant. It rots pretty quick. And so it's not as strong. The shrinkage is minimal and it's not super opinionated with how it behaves when it dries. It doesn't twist as much as some woods, but and then it's inexpensive. The other thing with pine is if you like the knots, the contrast of red knots and white wood, that can be a pro. For some people, it would be a con for others. Oak, the biggest strong point with oak is, take a guess? Strong. It's strong, in my opinion. There's also the look. We have some pictures up here to show you for that as well. But so it's super strong. It's particularly in perpendicular to grain strength. So if you split firewood, how many have ever split firewood? Cedar's pretty great. Oak will eat your wedges, right? And that's perpendicular to grain strength. So Doug fir and oak are equal when you go parallel to grain. So if you got a piece of wood horizontal and you're trying to shear the planes, that's about 500 pounds per inch. And oak is the same parallel to grain as well as perpendicular to grain. And Doug fir is about 250 perpendicular grain. So that's Doug fir's weak Achilles heel. And what that means for us, we use a lot of Doug fir, is that, see these pegs over here? They have to be figured out to have enough distance from the edge. And as long as you have that distance covered, you're golden. But it's that, and with any type of wood, whether even if it's bolts that the engine truss an engineer has done for like a modern truss with plates and bolts, they are still using how much wood is behind that peg or behind that bolt and what's it going to take to rip things apart. So oak, when it dries, one of the negatives is that it is volatile. In the timber frame industry, in the Timber Framers Guild, the saying goes that if you cut a frame out of white oak, put it together fast, because if you wait very long, you're going to be in joints and it just really goes crazy. One of the reasons that is because oak is a bendy tree, and so when you try to get a log out of that, you almost always have to go boxed hard, and so that amplifies things. But by nature, it's an opinionated piece of wood. And then, so going to the Doug fir, which is what we predominantly use, and I feel like is the best wood for timber framing, it's relatively affordable. You can get it in big sizes. It behaves fairly well for shrinkage. It's really strong, except for the perpendicular to grain, which you have to address. And yeah, I mean, the big sizes, and it grows here. It's right in our backyard. It's prized all over the world. So this, if you were going to optimize wood for just overall serviceability, I think that's the top one. Any questions here? No, but we do have a printout. Would you like to take one home?
So I got them right here. So yeah, let's go ahead and start using stuff.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe I'll go. Okay, and then we're just going to show you some examples of different projects using, this one's using Doug fir. And Monica, what do you have to say about this project?
Yeah, this is a good example of how stain can be used to completely alter the appearance of the wood species. This is a little bit more of an opaque stain that is on the wood, and so you're not seeing the real true color of the wood come through, but you are still getting some of the grain characteristics. You're still seeing the striations in the wood, and it's a good example of using some contrast of color in the siding with the timbers and how we've actually tied that into the fascia boards and the trim detail. So yeah, I think it's a really well executed example of something that doesn't have that real kind of characteristic wood look.
Yep, and Sherry's done a lot of color mixing for us. I think you provided the stain on this one, Sherry. Okay, here's the project that is done at the beach, and this is done out of cedar. And you guys have probably all been to the beach. What is the most effective siding at the beach? Cedar shake, no stain, no nothing, let it gray, right? And that's what this owner chose to do. You can see it's graying unevenly, but one thing that's real cool is if you look on the roof, there's no tar paper. It's done like the old days. You got the skip sheathing, and then the shakes right on top of that. Eventually the salt water and air will gray it out. I think it'll be spectacular. It probably is now because this was a pretty old photo. Monica?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent example of how someone can be in love with the process, and that's something that I'll speak to a little bit later. But just not worrying about having that perfection from the get-go, and being able to allow the wood to actually take its natural final destination of whatever the color is that it's going to be. And I think it's unique, it's different as you kind of start to watch that process work. But I think if you can kind of just go with it and not have your head too caught up in perfection, I think it's really a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I agree 100%. Okay, here's a redwood. Earlier I talked about redwood with its uses. It generally tends to be used in decks and pergolas, that sort of thing, because it is got its unique look. You've got the whites and the reds, and you wouldn't want to invest that kind of beauty for studs, right? Here you have, there's metal. So this was done for the Street of Dreams and home shows. You've got metal brackets to kind of make it more modern, metal joining at the top, and a curved roof, which kind of speaks to modern style. Monica, what do you see in this photo that's noteworthy?
I think this is a real interesting mix of what you would typically kind of see as the redwood being a little bit more of a traditional material. The redder tones tends to kind of lend itself better towards traditional design, but it's juxtaposed with some of those metal details, which are a little bit more modern and unique and different. And sometimes that contrast of material can really just give you a super unique look, and something that's very different and not something that every neighbor is going to have. So yeah, I think it's great.
Perfect. And here's some oak. Can you guys see this okay? Or should I can bring it in a little closer here. So there's an oak step. You know, that's, as a big piece of wood, that's a beautiful thing, right? And then here's a piece of oak that's a newel post. And this particular project, this is done by a friend of mine. Let me just zoom this up here. This wood was air dried before they milled it, or it was milled in bigger pieces. And so these checks are still true. You notice the piece is basically square. That's because if you have time you have an advantage. You just let it dry. And then after it's twisted, just resaw it. If you're looking for an 8x8, cut a 10x10, let it dry, twist, whatever, and then just boop, 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 resaw it, and you're back to good. But there's definitely a color difference. It's a dense wood. The growth rings are tight. And then here's a interior picture. And this is a crock truss. Oak is a traditional timber frame wood, as well as a crock truss. You may have seen this big support. It's common sense. Farmers used it back in the day to build their barn. And my friend did a great job with it. But Monica, go ahead. Oop, she froze up. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Okay, go ahead, Monica. What do you notice about these photos?
Yeah, this one I think is a super interesting look at what almost looks like a stained glass window, and how using that mixture of wood tone to create a very unique design. This one has some contrast of materials and color, and then you're starting to see some of the shapes accentuated in the contrast of the background with the tone of the wood. It's just a super unique look.
Yep. Okay, I think that's it. So here is a project that Monica has done. And go ahead and walk us through where the owners started out with and kind of how it evolved, and any colors. They don't have to be just wood colors because they all kind of work in tandem, right? Oop.
Might be our signal.
What's that?
It might be our signal. She's froze, so I think that Zoom's probably gonna restart it. Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
Right up until her segment.
Uh-huh. So Monica's going to get started. Do you guys have any questions? You're passing wood around. You're looking at literature there. What have you guys noticed?
This one's heavy.
Yeah.
White oak, I believe. Is that normally the case with white oak?
Yeah, oak is a heavy wood. Yep.
3.9 pounds per board foot.
For dried.
It's a dry oak. 2.7 pounds per board foot for dry
Uh-huh.
2.2 pounds per board foot for redwood. 1.5 pounds per board foot for cedar.
Wow. So that tells you a lot of what's going on. So I was just working on a honeydew project for my wife, and I was using old Doug fir that I had laying around, and one stair stringer. They were about 6, maybe 8 foot long, 7 foot long. One of them was very dense wood, and it almost felt like it weighed twice as much as the other one.
There you go.
Okay, we're back. I'll finish my little story here. I'm regaling the audience with jokes. Aspiring
Oh, good for you.
Right. Anyway, it's just really interesting, and you can tell that if you get a piece that's heavy, it's synonymous with strength. You know, a piece that's really light, the grain's further apart. There's not as much natural resins in the wood, and they don't teach that in lumber grading books, but it is a real thing. Heavy wood, more strength. But you do have to look at knot patterns and different things for grading lumber and figuring out where weaknesses is. But okay, Monica, bring us through this, kind of the history, what the challenges were, and when you speak to colors, it doesn't have to be just colors of wood. You with us? Ah!
That's internet.
It's the internet is just giving us grief. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to the second project.
Okay, you're back. Or I'm back.
Okay. All right. I was just skipping ahead to the next project, Monica. Why don't you just take it from here and we'll just
Okay.
move through whatever slides are left on this. So give us the backstory of what the problems the owners faced, and when you talk to colors, kind of the whole picture.
Yeah. So this was a remodel. This is a client I've worked with on 3 different houses. This is one down in Portland. And it was an existing remodel where they were wanting to stay within the footprints of the house. So not extending out any walls, just kind of reorganizing some of the internal spaces. They really wanted a master or a primary suite on the main floor. And so we converted 2 bedrooms and a hall bathroom into a suite with a walk-in closet and a bathroom for their bedroom.
And just for the audience, that's right behind here. There was bedrooms, laundry rooms. They gutted that, made it a master suite. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they had some walls that were like, there was a pantry that we pulled out, which opened up that space for the baby grand. I'm not sure if that's shown in your picture there or not, Bert.
We'll move to the next picture. Oops. Here, we'll move back.
But they had a baby grand piano that we were trying to make room for. And so we just pulled out the walls, and you can see where the ceiling line, there was some areas where there was flat ceiling, and then that did go into a vault in that living area. And so we used some false beams in that area. They had some real skimpy ones that were existing, and so we built those up just a little bit just to make them a little bit beefier. But this was one where we had to compromise, and that's something that you and I talk about a lot, Bert, is the client ultimately gets to make the final decision. And this was one where I was really suggesting that they do some wood tone beams that tied in the wood floor. But the husband in particular was pretty set on the idea of wanting it to be more subtle. And so we ended up painting it out, and that's the result that you have. It's effective, and it really is just one of those things that it kind of comes down to personal preference. And I'm always going to try and guide folks to their taste and what they think is going to be best. I'm always going to interject and give my opinion, but the client always has the final say. So that was definitely the case here.
Perfect. Yep. And I could see where the beams, if they were darker, it would really bookend the color scheme. But then there is a little more light as a trade-off for what they got. So.
Right.
Okay, the next one is, so this particular project was a little bit, you might say, tragic in that, well, it could be looked at as tragic. How many, have you experienced tragedy before? Have you experienced tragedy before? Tragedy. Oh yeah. This project here had a little, you could call it a tragic end, but we'll get to that. So what we start off with, Monica and I were working together, and this is where the architect, or designer in this case, had come to, and they kind of stopped. They just knew they wanted some timbers there. And so they had a placeholder. And then here's the back elevation. The back elevation is real similar to the front. Just got this piece down here. And here's the floor plan. So Monica, if you will, go ahead and bring people up to speed with what the owners were trying to accomplish. Right.
So this was a client that I actually knew from high school, and they had moved to California, but this was a property that her dad had and then had passed away and passed on to her. And they like to come up to Kalama, and they've got lots of family up here, and so they thought that maybe this would be a second home for them. Initially, it was kind of a rental that they were using, and they had decided maybe this was going to be turned into to their second home. So we were looking at a number of things with the interior. If you look there on the left, you can see that we've pushed the kitchen clear back to that left-hand corner.
And this,
Because we've
this
got-
right here before was laundry room and what else?
There was laundry room, a powder room, and a pantry, all
Okay.
kind of tucked back in a pocket back there.
Okay, and the kitchen was somewhere right here.
It was closer to the living room, so more where
Okay.
that left-hand beam is.
Okay.
And there's view on the back side of the house, and so we wanted to take advantage of that with the kitchen. Hang on just a second. Excuse me.
Good old COVID.
Yeah.
Not hacking on us.
But they wanted to make it theirs, and so the idea was that we would have sort of a portico that would extend on the front of the house, and then we would carry some beams all the way through the central column, so to speak, and then all the way out to the back of the house and act as a back patio cover, essentially.
Yep.
They lived in California and really liked the idea of that open beam look. So yeah, you can probably show them the next one.
Okay. So just hold this in your mind's eye. Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Just take a look at kind of this here, hold it in your mind's eye. Okay, and tell me the differences. Scissor truss above, yep. What's that? You like the first one better, the owners did too, but their pocketbook like this one better.
Right.
And so you'll see, I'll go back to it. So this one here is a complete, there's no scissor truss. The exterior of the roof, the top part is the same as the inside. Okay, so it's just with rafters, decking, bam, simple. This has a little bit more strength with the angle, and that is visually, it feels stronger, and it's more majestic, has more presence. It does have a higher ceiling. Some people find a higher ceiling in an outdoor living area that it's kind of like too much like a cathedral, too airy, and lets in too much of the elements. So some things to think about. One of the cons, especially if you have scissor trusses on the inside of the house, is you have a difference in, if you're on the inside, if there's a lower roof, then you go outside, and it can be kind of a con, especially with making windows look right. But and then on the second piece back here, the posts are straight. There's no trusses, no stuff in the middle, right? Now, if you ever have to work with scissor trusses and beautify scissor trusses, I don't remember when we stumbled on this, but this particular shape, the eye does not like it. It's like it disappears to nothing. It's a story without end or something like that. And the reason this looks decent is because the beams are tapered. So we restore some balance with more visual weight on this end. And if you were to take these beams, this beam here, and just make it the same without the taper, boo, hiss, thumbs down. Doesn't look good. If you were to take this beam and run from the small end, same effect. Boo, hiss, thumbs down. It just does not look right. So if you're ever rectifying something like this, you just have to get visual weight to offset the imbalance your eye picks up on that. Just a little takeaway for you there. Not so much with colors. And then the front is pretty much the same, except for the money's up front with the stone. You notice there's siding in the back and stone here. Yes?
Just out of curiosity, what was the difference in price between the scissor truss and the first one we were looking at?
That's a Josh question, but I couldn't even hazard a guess. If I was going to say percentage-wise, maybe 60-40. So you'd have 60% of, if you have $100 for the big one, maybe you're cutting down to 60 for this one. You still have all the logistics and all the overhead and all that. There's less wood and it's not structural, but it's something like that. Okay, so here's the front. You see the stone, and here you have the same scenario. Same scenario for the front as the back. And do you have anything to mention here on the exterior, Monica?
No, I think the only thing, and you kind of alluded to it at the beginning, is of course they loved the detail in the first one. The scissor option was really just more for budget. It wasn't their favorite, and for obvious visual reasons, I think.
Yep. Okay, now we'll go to the interior here. Okay, so just looking at this again, you're going to see pictures of this area right here. And there's a transition here you can pay attention to notice as well. And here's the cutaway view. Here's that transition again. That's always whether to emphasize that with a beam or whether not to. You'll see two examples here. Okay, so here is the scissor truss, so the lower roof, and with this beam here in the transition, kind of emphasizes that ceiling because it's now all wood, and you have a beam in front of the fireplace with a king post, which wouldn't have to be there. And then if you go to the steeper one with the money version that people liked, this one is a little more open. This beam right here is load bearing, and it would load bear through the fireplace. Couldn't be just on masonry, but you could have steel or a framed post. And likewise on the other side of the fireplace, that's a load bearing beam. These are decorative. And here we followed through with the taper again because it just has a good effect a lot of times. And then you'll notice here there is no beam. How many of you noticed that on the transition? So sometimes it looks, sometimes less is more, and then there's also, personal preference. It goes back and forth. Go ahead, Monica.
If you look at the one where it has the asymmetrical detail coming down through the fireplace, I think that's your previous screen, Bert. And then, yeah, that one there. It has a little bit more of that kind of lodgy look to the interior. In fact, we've even added that parallel beam off on the right-hand side there that accentuates the ceiling transition from the vault to the flat ceiling. And we were trying to kind of show them because they liked a little bit more modern detailing, but they definitely liked some of the rustic qualities of the timbers. And so if you flip back to that second one where the fireplace goes all the way up and it doesn't have the cross beam there, you'll notice that there's no beam there on the right-hand ceiling transition. It's just flat. And it just has a little bit sleeker, cleaner, maybe a little bit more modern kind of look to it. So that's the one nice thing about some of these SketchUp drawings is we can really kind of show folks what it's going to look like, and some of those subtle differences can make a big difference in the overall appearance.
And then you guys might think that you like perfection, but you actually don't. There's beauty in asymmetry. Okay? And if you don't believe me, I need you to go buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks and I'll show you proof. Okay? So Starbucks, when they had the face of the mermaid, it didn't quite resonate with people. Didn't quite resonate. I mean, they were close, but it didn't quite resonate. So finally, what they did is they took the dash of ink right here and they made it a little bit fatter and a little bit longer to where it wasn't perfect. And then that resonated. And in this case, sometimes balancing out center and all this is the thing to do. But don't be afraid of asymmetry. There's beauty there. And in this case, this is a case in point. When the fireplace sits where it does, probably because of floor plan requirements, but that ends up looking kind of nice when it's not centered that way. And we see that a lot of time with truss spacing and a lot of different things we see in the design side of things. Sometimes it's better to throw away your tape, throw away your calculator, and place things by eye, and then try to make sense of why they should exact placement. Okay, before we go there, I said this story right here, I said it had a tragic end. So nobody died, nobody was murdered, it wasn't a divorce, but they didn't build it. So COVID came along and they got scared. Go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, we were through the final design. We had all the finishes selected, all the colors were picked, everything down to the final wall colors. And they were working through budgeting. And we're getting a couple of different quotes back from builders, and then everything shut down. And it was just a very scary moment, as we all know, for a couple of months, really. And they decided to end up turning it back into a rental, and not making any of the really unique changes that we talked about. So they, I think, implemented some of the colors and along those lines, but yeah, definitely changed the overall design for sure.
Yep. And then is it Michael, or do we have an architect in our midst? Nope. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, so the owners did not follow through with it, got scared, turned it into a rental. So just two takeaways so from this. One is that if this should happen to you, if you were to go through all your planning, whatever, you get your blueprints all done, or all practically done, and then decide that you're not going to do it, it can feel like a letdown, like a waste. Two things to contradict that or to balance that out. First one is, I heard a story about a friend of my dad's when I was too young to be aware of it, but I was living in Wyoming, and my dad's friend would get enthused on a project, just research the jeebers out of it, say he was restoring a car, he would have every nut, every bolt, every leaf spring sourced, and have the whole thing planned out. And then he never really pulled the trigger and start. And after seeing this cycle go through 3 or 4 times, my father asked me, he says, well, Don, what's going on? I mean, I see you've been enthused on this. I mean, why don't you do it? And Don says, well, Joe, he says, I get down to it and I realize that all the fun's done. I mean, I've thought everything through and now it's just work. So I never pull the trigger. But most of us, if we go through a home plan, we want to see fruit for our results. The other consolation prize, if you should find yourself in a place where you have put in a ton of planning and then you realize it's not what you want, is that there's value in knowing what you don't want. That's a lot of times the path of, whenever we go from point A to point B, it's almost never linear. It's zig and zag, up and down, and like, yeah, that'd be really cool. Okay, yeah, let's do that. And you can start going that way, and oh, well, maybe not. And so that's finding out what you don't want has its reward too. So this is for us, when Monica and myself and our team, we put a lot of heart and soul into this. It's really kind of disappointing when it doesn't get built, but hey, that's life. We understand it. Any questions so far? All righty. Okay, I might have went one too far. Let's see here. Okay, it's holding. All right, so this is a project that I did with Monica's partner, Kara, quite a few years ago. And wow, this is quite a lag time. It's a pretty big house, but it still has a cozy craftsman feel. how did that happen? What had to take place to make a 5,000 square foot house feel cozy like a craftsman? Dang, I don't know if I dare punch a button here. Okay. Good. So on this particular job, Kara, and I don't know if Kara asked me, but I think the Peter, the owner, did. He called me up and he says, "Hey, Kara and my wife are talking about painting some of the beams. What do you think?" I'm like, don't do it. It's beautiful wood. And I, of course, didn't react that strongly. And Kara maybe had even asked me, and I said, well, I wouldn't do it if it was me. I mean, it's beautiful wood, right? But they thought it over and they decided to paint. You see these corbels that match the trim. And I had to kind of eat crow. It turned out good. And one of the reasons it looks good is, well, Monica said that it kind of brings us to a tones down the rustic or the wood piece, and it kind of helps with that craftsman cozy feel. Monica, you said a few things earlier about this photo.
Yeah, I think when you've got a lot of detail in an exterior like this one, and all the roof line changes and the bump out and the detail over each door and the garages, there's a lot going on. And if all of those elements were the warm wood tone against the green, it's definitely going to appear to be busier. Where by painting some of those elements, it still gives you the detail, but those elements recede a little bit, and everything isn't begging for your attention all at the same time. And it actually gives a little more weight to the wood pieces, where that's where your focus is. That's where your eye is drawn, instead of it looking, like it's just a smattering of wood across the whole facade.
Yep. Okay, and here's just a picture of the garage, straight on. And then this right here is a little peek behind the curtain of how the design process works. Generally, we'll sketch something up by hand to kind of get a feel for what ideas might work, and then we put it into the 3D. And this is a little bit more detailed than our hand sketches now. They're pretty rough, but that somehow some architects, some artists, they say, there's a saying that says, follow the hand. So you try not to think too much and let your hand kind of flow. And there is something to it. Here's a picture of the same project in a model. And then here's a picture of the ceiling. You see the beams here. You can see the Doug fir oranges, the orange, the red. This is kind of a really natural stain. And then the ceiling, Monica, go ahead and speak to that.
Yeah, you can look at the overall look of the wall color, the tongue and groove ceiling, and then with the timber detailing, and it all has a very soft kind of cozy effect to it. It feels very warm and inviting, but nothing is really demanding your attention. Excuse me. And you can tell how the soft green actually complements the orange and red tones in the wood. So those actually are intentionally selected for that very reason. But yeah, it just has a really nice soft effect, but still enough going on in the beam detail where you get the architecture, and the detail still stands out enough. But it's not overpowering or too strong.
Yep, and then this here for, if you find yourself wondering, do you want a sheetrock ceiling or a wood ceiling? This is a really good middle road. This is a semi-transparent color, so semi-transparent grayish white. So it still has the feel of wood, but it's not, tones it back, kind of a happy medium. And then here's where the entry, one particular point I remember from the design on this beam right here is not at 90 degrees. but that's where it wanted to be. And I resisted it for quite a while in figuring out that design. Finally went from corner to corner and it worked. It's beauty and asymmetry, right? And then here you can do the green you spoke of, you see it more here, right, Monica?
Right, yeah, and it gives you some of that contrast, the walls with the red tones of the beams, but it still has that really nice soft appearance to it, and it's very warm and inviting feeling.
Yep. Okay, here's just a close-up of some joinery. Here you can see we have some hardwood things splitting it. So you see there's going to be some shrinkage. You can see a house joint here. There's a little shrinkage. Just wanted to show you that close-up. So with wood, there will be shrinkage unless you're doing totally reclaimed wood or RFKD. Did Josh talk to you guys about RFKD? Does anyone know what it means? It's a radio frequency kilnite. And so it's like a great big microwave. They run current through it. It drives from the inside out. It's kind of a process to set up, and it takes a while, but the wood comes out true. Okay, this was a piece Monica's partner Kara spent a lot of time with. What makes this nice, Monica? What is it about this that's so appealing?
Well, I think it's always important to consider all surfaces and to not neglect the ceilings in particular. There's a lot of detail that can be brought into the ceiling, similar to what they did in the entry where you almost have that coffered ceiling effect. This one has that inlay, and then with a mural or a design on the inset portion. Those are the types of things that bring interest and uniqueness to a project, and it's some of those things that you can incorporate some personal touches, some preferences that the client might have. You know, maybe there's a favorite painting or colors that people are just particularly drawn to, and so creating some unique areas of interest like this, I think, really add to the overall design for sure.
Perfect, yep. And so we've talked about cracking timbers, the kiln drying. Any questions on that? That covered pretty well? Okay, wood species, as far as the lighter colors maybe lining up with modern, and rustic might be looking for knots in the wood or heavy wood. And then the pros and cons of wood species. Any questions there? Which wood is the winner? Thank you. Okay, and then we went through timber colors in the context of projects. And before we go to questions and answers, I'm going to ask Monica for a final takeaway. If you were going to learn one thing from Monica tonight, what is that one thing, Monica?
The one thing for me is I think that these projects really should be enjoyable. It should be a fun process. There's going to be stress for sure, but the stress shouldn't be the thing that's the overriding element. And I think when you put people around you that you can put your trust in and you can trust their skills and expertise, I think that it tends to be a much more enjoyable and a smoother process overall.
Yep. And if I was going to give you guys one takeaway, if you hear nothing else in 5 years, you remember nothing else, it's this. Start planning with gusto. You don't want to be negative at the start. But in the process of your planning, figure out a way to be Mr. Pessimist. Inject some negativity in there. Why do I say that? Any guesses?
So you won't get this nothing.
Because it's going to happen.
Nothing always finishes like it was.
Yeah, nothing never goes as planned.
It's to manage expectations.
Manage expectations. Yep. And those are all good reasons. That's part of it. The one other piece is, if you will, look for red flags and play the pessimist for a while, especially with who you hire, you will sharpen your senses, so to speak, in who you hire. And myself as a businessman, the two biggest mistakes I have made is who I hire and who I work for. It's all about a good fit. And in fact, if you guys ever have a project, you send someone in to talk to Josh for a project, that's first and foremost on his mind is, are we a good fit? And the whole conversation goes around that. And if we're not a good fit, nobody has to boot us out of the saddle, we'll jump. I mean, it's no good for anyone, right? So that would be my takeaway for you. With whatever you're planning, put some pessimism in there. Look for red flags, say, okay, and sharpen your thinking on that. In fact, we have an article in the last inspiration report, Timberframe Magazine, that talks just to that. Okay, questions and answers.
We just got our issue
Oh, you did? Okay.
of
Yep.
log and timber home.
Okay.
Common questions for us, other than the usual, so how much? Common questions for us would be, let's see, you get into it and other than how much, let me think about this, because I was gonna use that. And then it was.
Oh, I stole your answer.
Yeah. And that's exactly the same answer that we would give as well, right? There's a lot of design that has to be done before we can get to the how much. Okay, here's the answer that I'm gonna give. A different question. This is a question that help you along the way, work with that budget and work within those confines. Any questions?
One of the things that, and this is a common problem with builders and alike, anyone who has to kind of price out a moving project like this, a moving target, is if, for example, for Josh's example, say you were to come in and say, I got $1 million. Well, we start designing around that, we're trying to rein you back, and there's a lot of extra design and a lot of extra work that goes into reworking things because, oh, I do want to spend more square footage. Oh, I do want cathedral ceiling. Oh, I do want a round staircase. And we're left scratching our head saying, well, where's the money coming from? And there's, on the other side of it, there's the other way where people are just so starstruck with their plans that they're not thinking about the money, and it just doesn't penetrate. And plans get drawn up and get thrown in the wastebasket. It happens.
I don't know if you like, I do have these Q&A questions from the emails sent out.
Oh, yes. We'll take a couple of them.
Okay. Well, there's a couple. There's actually 3 pertaining to trees cut from a customer's property.
Okay.
Using on their own project. There's 3 different questions about that.
Okay, so if you have trees on your property, you may be thinking that, hey, there's a big savings. I have the logs, take them down, cut them up. It generally, the quick, dirty answer is if it's going to be near to your heart, do it. If it's not near to your heart, or the sentimental value of using wood that you have on your property, then the payoff is, there could be a payoff if the trees are quality. Generally, we get into them and they're too small, there's too many knots. I mean, we just really need high quality wood. And then there's the trucking issue, and if there's not enough logs, then by the time the logging's done. So if you're gonna come down anyway, that's great. There may be something there, but if you're kind of thinking that you're doing it for savings, don't go there. If you're doing it for sentimental values because it feels good, that works. That answers the question well enough?
Yeah, for sure. What about, there's 2 questions pertaining to like sizing, sizing of like posts for support. So could you speak to what is required by engineering as far as sizing versus the look and feel of it?
Sure. So the question is sizing for posts and beams, engineering versus kind of what looks right. And just for reference, a 4x4 post, so 3.5 by 3.5 nominal 4x4 post holds up a ton of weight. In fact, 5,400 pounds. I mean, like for our standard like entries and that, a 4x4 post would work in a lot of the cases, but visually it fits like socks on a rooster. Just doesn't look good. So what you'll see we have got a big bag of tricks for if there's an entry going up, say we just so there's a stone bases, this adds visual weight. You can flare the post out to get visual weight. And if there's not a stone base, there's one particular project, it was a small back porch, and our designer was in, and his father happened to be the builder. So it's kind of cool for his father to see the magic behind the design. There was a post that came down just on the corner, 2 of them, and we tapered it out 2 inches to the outside. Just 2 inches. And we could change the size of the post, make it bigger, and it still looked a little bit awkward. Just a little bit like that scissor truss thing. Remember that? Well, and then whenever it would go to just straight all the way, it would look kind of skinny and awkward, no matter what size the post was. But with the little 2-inch taper, hit that sweet spot. So that's visual weight. And most of what we do, I would say 90% of the beams we size are done for looks, what looks right, what feels right. Sometimes yeah. And then there's big spans on beams that will be make it for engineering. But are there any other questions? Yes.
Question about grading, those timbers that have to be graded, and at what point are they graded versus like steel?
Yes, there's services that will come and grade your lumber. But for what we're doing in the quality we're doing, the last time I had to get lumber graded was when I did a job for Timberline Lodge in 2012. So that was, oh yeah, okay. So we do have a grader that we know that comes out, and looks it over and gives us a thumbs up. Okay, is there, yep.
As far as heating and cooling, is that ever an issue with people, or probably shouldn't be? Is that something to consider when you're?
Heating and cooling when you're dealing with timbers and timber frame?
Yeah, they're generally less efficient.
With, well, the efficiency isn't gonna do so much with the timbers unless when the timbers go into the wall. So you got a timber that goes through the wall, you could timber shrink and you could have a hole there, right? As far as efficiency that's gonna be your wall system and your insulation system. It's the two best are spray and foam and then the SIPs. Are you familiar with SIPs panels? That's like a giant Oreo cookie. Plywood or OSB, styrofoam, OSB, and that can make a envelope on the roof and the walls and enclose the building. It's super energy efficient. As far as that goes, is there anyone that would like to share with, what the best part of their biggest takeaway was here? Biggest takeaway for the night, anyone? What you're gonna walk out of here with? Inspiration. Okay, how about make it fun? Monica's point.
Where,
Yes.
and you may have already covered this, but is there any places we can find Monica online?
We have not covered that. Monica, where can we find you?
Yeah, we've got a good website. It's linkeddesigngroup.com, and that's LINKED, linkeddesigngroup.com. And we've got some
Oh,
pictures
okay,
of
right on.
projects that we have on there.
Oh, okay, yeah, cool. Here we go. It's on the right.
Think.
There we are.
Link Design Group.
So there we are. Taylor was on it. I wasn't, Monica.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, so that kind of wraps it up. If you guys,
Did you do the book giveaway?
I did not. Did you give out tickets?
No.
How are we gonna do this?
Well, we could count it out and do a number generator, Should we start from there or from there? Your choice. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Let's do a random number generator. 2 of them, right? So out of 13.
I got it.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay, out of 13. All right, it starts from there, goes back this way. If I'm not mistaken, that's 13.
So 7.
7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've got a book for you, sir. All right, congrats. Next one.
And in that book, yes, on chapter
Number 11.
Number 11. 8,
All right.
9, 10, 11. There it is.
Okay, way, winner, chicken dinner.
You should have got a number, then I would have been 7.
Oh, I already had a book.
To Josh's point, when he was talking about budget, in chapter 15, it says managing the money. You're gonna see one page with 15 examples of timbers in a room that is the same
I
size,
passed them around.
with the same wall height, and the same roof slope, which you can manipulate that and change things dramatically for look and feel. But it's all done with timbers, and you get a huge difference in look and feel. And so that is another point Josh goes through in the brainstorm, is that we generate the ideas and you have the steering wheel. There's a lot that can be done. Okay, give yourselves a round of applause. You're well on your way, wherever you're going. And there's still food to eat. And if you have any particular questions, talk to me, Josh. Greg, yep.
Yeah, Bert, I was just gonna say, so Sherry is here from Timber Pro UV. We use her product exclusively. And so here's some flyers I'm gonna hand around to you folks. And if you have any questions for her about her product, I'm sure she'd be fine fielding any questions you have from her.
And they're in Portland, correct?
Yep,
Yeah.
on Burnside.
Burnside.
Yeah.
Yes, they're in Portland.
Really quick, Sherry, what is the biggest thing that you're most proud of with your stain?
It went well. Thanks for the help, dude.
A waterborne oil-based. Okay, more durable than the flammable. Environmentally safe, non-hazardous. And I can speak to that because when we put the stain on, you're not, you can just tell it's not as, it's not this, don't drink this stuff, right? No. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good night. Breaking up here.
Good night.
Yeah, okay. Talk later, Monica.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.